Hello. After discussing semaphores, monitors, and other synchronization-related topics, we finally reached the topics of deadlocks and livelocks. This is not a very long unit, and I hope after learning how to avoid or prevent deadlock from happening, you are able to make your concurrent program better. So first of all, let's discuss what a deadlock is. The first thing for analyzing deadlock is the system model. So we assume that the system resources are used in the following way. The first is we make a request and then use it and finally release it. So request means a process makes a request. For an example, semaphore wait or monitor acquire something like that to use a system resource, which cannot be granted immediately. Then the requesting process blocks until it can acquire the resource successfully. This is a request. Remember, making a request does not mean it's always successful. If it is successful, then you get the resource. Otherwise, the requesting process is blocked until the resource can be granted for use. Then, after getting the resource, we can use it. Normally, this resource is used in a mutually exclusive way. And finally, after releasing it, the process, after using it, the process releases the resource. For example, a semaphore signal or a monitor release. We will use the example of dining philosophers to illustrate this. Remember, we have 5 chairs, one for each philosopher, but we only have 5 chopsticks. A philosopher must get his left followed by his right before he can eat. Therefore, we assign 5 semaphores, one for each chopsticks. Initially, each chopstick is available. So we wait on the left chopsticks for philosopher I. So this is a request. After getting its left chopstick, we wait for the next one, that is make a request to use the right one. After philosopher I could get both chopsticks, he can eat. So this is the use phase. And these two are in the request phase. After using or after eating, this philosopher signals his right, signal his left chopsticks, and this section is the release phase. So in what follows, we assume that your program can be arranged so that the resource can be modeled after request, use, and release. So what is deadlock? We have seen this many times. Let's give it a more accurate definition. Only one process, we won't have any deadlock. So we need to have a set of processes, at least 2. A set of processes is in a deadlock state when every process in the set is waiting for an event that can only be caused by another process in the same set. For example, suppose we have processes A, B, and C. They involved in a deadlock. Then A is waiting for something that can only be caused to happen by either B or C. For B, B is waiting for something that can only be caused to happen by A and C and so on. So here, because a process is waiting for an event to happen, and that event currently is not happening because the processes that could cause this event to happen are also blocked. So the key here is that all processes in a deadlock state are in the waiting state. So let me quickly go through it. A set of processes is in a deadlock state. When every process in the set is waiting for something that can only be caused by other processes in the same set. In the 1970s, deadlock was a very hot topic in research. We have the following very important theorems. This is referred to as deadlock necessary condition. It goes as follows. If a deadlock occurs, then each of the following 4 conditions must hold. Now, suppose we have condition A, condition B, condition C, and a condition D. So this means if a deadlock occurs, then A and B and C and D must hold at the same time. So what are these conditions? Mutual exclusion. It means at least one resource must be held in a non-shareable way. So basically, if you have mutual exclusion in your system, there could be a chance that deadlock could happen because I get the resource. And that has to be used in a mutually exclusive way. But I want something being held by you, which is also used in a mutually exclusive way. Then I'm waiting for you and you wait for me. So mutual exclusion means a condition. This condition means at least one resource must be held in a non-shareable way. The second one is hold and wait. It means a process must be holding a resource and waiting for another. The third one is no preemption. Once a resource is allocated to a process, you cannot take that resource away from that process. And finally, circular waiting. This means we have a set of processes, P1, P2, P3 to Pn. So circular waiting, P1 waits for P2, P2 waits for P3, and so on. And Pn-1 waits for Pn, and finally, Pn waits for P1. So we have a circular waiting pattern. So it means this theorem goes as follows. If a deadlock occurs, then mutual exclusion and hold and wait and no preemption and circular waiting are true at the same time. So why is this theorem important? Now, look at here. The key word here is necessary. So mutual exclusion and hold and wait and no preemption and circular waiting. These 4 are necessary conditions. What does that mean by necessary? It means if deadlock occurs, then these 4 will happen. So it means if a deadlock occurs, all 4 conditions must be true. Now, return to your probably high school day or discrete math. Remember, we have a proposition. If P, then Q. This proposition is equivalent to not P, then not Q. So where not Q is the opposite of Q. Not P is the opposite of P. So the necessary condition is if P is we have a deadlock, then Q means mutual exclusion, hold and wait, no preemption, and circular waiting are true at the same time. So what does that mean by not Q? Not Q, it means not A and B and C and D. So according to De Morgan law, you learn somewhere, the not or the negation of A and B and C and D is not A or not B or not C or not D. So that means if we have a deadlock, then mutual exclusion and hold and wait and no preemption and circular waiting must be true at the same time. So not Q means one of these conditions is false. Which one is false? It depends on your implementation. So not Q here means no, the negation of mutual exclusion is no mutual exclusion. The negation of hold and wait means no hold and wait. That is, some processes do not have something and wait for something else. No, the negation of no preemption is we can preempt the resource. That is, if a process is granted to use some resources, the system can take one of them away. And finally, no circular waiting, that is obvious. Now, if one of these conditions is false, then not P. Well, originally P is we have a deadlock. Then not P means we don't have a deadlock. So the importance of this theorem is as long as one of the four conditions fails. You don't do two, you just get one fails. There will be no deadlock. Now, let me quickly restate this. If we have a deadlock, then mutual exclusion, hold and wait, no preemption, and circular waiting must true at the same time. So according to this not Q, then not P, that if one of these four conditions is false, then the system would not have deadlock. This is the importance of the previously stated theorem. Now, how do we use it? So this is our first one, deadlock prevention. The meaning of deadlock prevention is make sure deadlock will never happen in our program. Deadlock prevention means that it means making sure deadlock will never occur in our program. So how can we do that? We make sure one of the conditions fail. Then, according to the theorem, we won't have any deadlock. In the next few slides, we analyze each condition, each of these four conditions, to see which condition can be made to false. So the first one is mutual exclusion. It means mutual exclusion means some resources are shareable. And these resources must be accessed exclusively. But if you want to make sure your program can execute properly, then we cannot deny mutual exclusion. Let's take a look at the philosopher's problem. We have 5 chopsticks. Each philosopher must have his left and his right chopstick at the same time to eat. While while this chopsticks is being used by this philosopher cannot have it. Therefore, these chopsticks must be used in a mutually exclusive way. Therefore, if in your program there are resources that can only be accessed by one resource at a time, then you cannot deny mutual exclusion. So this is important. So mutual exclusion is probably the last condition you want to get rid of. Then let's analyze hold and wait. That means a process holds some resources and at the same time requests for other resources. Now look at this diagram. This diagram shows a deadlock. So each philosopher gets its left chopstick, the red arrow. And because every philosopher gets his left, all 5 chopsticks are taken. When these philosophers want to find and want to use his right chopsticks, his right chopstick is taken by his right neighbor. Therefore, every philosopher holds something and waits for something else. This is the hold and the wait condition. Now we know, at least we have seen several solutions to the dining philosopher problem without deadlock. So that means hold and wait can be avoided in some way. In general, what we want to do is making sure no process can hold some resources and request for other resources. 2 commonly seen strategies are possible. First of all, the first one is a process must acquire all resources before it runs. Remember, using monitor and semaphores, we are able to force a philosopher to have both chopsticks at the same time. So this means a process or a philosopher must acquire all chopsticks before it can eat. So this is one way to do that. The second one is when a process requests for resources, it must hold none. You may think that is ridiculous. Yes, it is. That means if a process wants to use something, this process must release everything it currently has, and then make a request of all the resources it wants, including those resources it just released. I have never seen a system implement deadlock-free solution in this way. But when I was young, as a junior programmer, I frequently use an IBM mainframe system, a small one. So we have to fill all sorts of job control language code, telling the system what resource my program must use. My program can run only if the operating system determines that all the resources I need are available. What are these resources? How many tape drivers I want to use, how many disk driver I want to use, and how much memory I need, and so on. So in both ways, resource utilization may be low because many resources will be held and unused for a long time. For example, as I mentioned, I program a small IBM mainframe. I have to fill out a form telling the system how many tape driver I want, how many disk driver I want, how much memory I need, and do I need card readers and how many? Do I need printers and how many? So only if my program can get everything, my program can run. But it's very likely that was when I was doing some scientific computing. We printed out our results at the end. So what does that mean? It means over 90% of the time my program is running, I don't use the printer. I use the printer in the last 10% of my running time. So the printer would be held by my program for 90% of the time. You may want to say, what's the problem? Yeah, this is the problem. My program runs for 10 hours. So that means if I get that printer cannot be used for 9 hours. Isn't it ridiculous? So this means, and this is what states here, many resources will be held and unused for a long time. And starvation is possible. A process that needs some popular resources, say printer, may have to wait indefinitely. So this is the meaning of a solution of the hold and the wait condition. Not very feasible, but indeed some older system did use this strategy. Now, we have seen two semaphore solutions, not the thinking, hungry, and eating version. Two versions, the weirdo version or lefty righty version, and the empty chair version. In the weirdo version, philosopher 1, 2, 3, 4 are normal. They take the left chopsticks first, followed by the right one. But the weirdo always takes his right chopsticks first, followed by the right one. So here, look at the diagram here. If the weirdo is faster than number 1, the weirdo would have his right chopsticks. Number 1 cannot eat. So number 1's right chopsticks is available. So number 2 can have it. So depending on how fast number 2, number 3, and number 4 are. So eventually, if we have a scenario like this, weirdo is 4, weirdo is faster, it gets it right. And number 4 has its left. So depending on whether weirdo is faster than number 4, weirdo can eat. If weirdo is slower, number 4 can eat. So we break the hold and wait cycle. There is always a process that does not follow hold and wait. Now, for the empty chair version, so the worst case is everyone gets his left. In this case, number 4 can eat because this one is not used. This is an empty chair. So in both solutions, we try to break the hold and wait pattern. And the solution with thinking, hungry, and eating states forces a philosopher to have both chopsticks before eating. Therefore, this is a very clean way to get rid of hold and wait. Then let's look at the no preemption. This means resource being held by a process cannot be taken away. To negate this condition, a process may deallocate all resources it holds so that the other processes can use. But this is sometimes not doable. While philosopher I is eating, his neighbor cannot take I's chopsticks away, forcing philosopher I to stop eating. Now return to my Example, if I acquired a printer for a long time, if the system can preempt the printer, that is, the printer can be taken away while I am using. For an example, I am printing probably 99% of the output. Well, my output usually consisted of thousands of pages. So while I am printing, say, 95% complete, the system takes my printer away and gives it to another process. Now, when the printer can be used by my program again, what am I supposed to do? Because someone is allowed to cut in and print this output. When I get a printer back, am I supposed to start printing from the very beginning or printing the remaining 5%? This is going to be a tough choice. So not very doable, but some system resources can be reproduced very easily. For an example, the CPU. Remember, even though your process has the CPU and the runs, when an interrupt occurs, the system could take the CPU away from your process and then gives the CPU back to you sometime later so that you could resume your execution. So remember this, some system resources cannot be preempted easily, but some can be. Now, finally, let's study circular waiting. Circular waiting is pretty easy. We have a set of process. The first one has something, waits for the second one waits for the third one, and so on. And the last one comes back and waits for the first one. So that's a circular waiting, even though it's also illustrate hold and wait. And this one waits for this one waits for this one waits for this one. It's a circular pattern. The weirdo for Cherry-Monte solutions all avoids circular waiting, and there's no deadlock. Then how to break the circular waiting in general? Well, there is a simple way to do that. No method is completely perfect, I warn you. This is referred to hierarchical ordering of resources. Again, proposed by Dijkstra. So hierarchical ordering means a system has resources. These resources are ordered in a hierarchical way. What does that mean by ordered in a hierarchical way? Level 0, level 1, level 2 to a highest level. Because a system can only have limited number of resources. Therefore, the levels in this hierarchical ordering must be finite. So a process can only request resources higher than it currently owns. To request lower order resources, a process must release all resources higher than or equal to the requesting one. This is very similar to the preempting strategy. Now, suppose a system orders its resources into 9 levels, L1, L2, L8, and L9. Suppose process PI has some resources. The highest one is at level 5, that's L5. Then PI can only request resources at higher level, that is level 6, level 7, level 8, and level 9. What if PI wishes to use a resource at level 3. Level 3 is lower than level 5. Therefore, PI must release all of its resources equal to or higher than level 3. So PI must release its all resources at level 5, all resources at level 4, and all resources at level 3. So this is the meaning of hierarchical ordering. A system resources are ordered in a hierarchical way. A process can only request resources of a higher level. And when a process wants to use a resource with lower level, then that process must release all resources higher than or equal to that level. So with hierarchical ordering, no circular waiting can occur. Here, I provide you with an intuitive explanation. Next slide will prove it very easily. Now, suppose we have a process, a number of processes, P1, P2 to Pn, involved in the resource waiting chain. That's P1 waits for P2, P2 waits for P3, and Pn-1 waits for Pn. So because it's hierarchical ordering, the level would only go up. So the resource level being owned by Pn is the highest of all. Remember this. So now, Pi has the highest level resource currently. So Pn may or may not request further resources. If Pn does not need any further resources, then Pn would run and eventually releases some resources. Once Pn releases some resources, these resources may be used by P1, P2, or Pn-1. So deadlock is not there. Now, what if Pn, whose resource is at the highest level, Pn requests further resources at even a higher level? Now, because Pn is the last in the chain, this higher level resource cannot be owned by P1, P2 to Pn-1. Therefore, after Pn is able to get that resource, Pn can run and eventually releases, probably along with some other resources. Then the situation returns to bullet 1. Again, we don't have deadlock. Now, if you have difficulty to understand this, please pause. Now, if you move to here, you may be surprised that a formal proof is rather easy, although you may not be used to it. Now, let's say, as we mentioned, every process owns some resources. Let L of Pi be the highest level of resources Pi has. So suppose Pi has resources L1, L3, and L6. So L of Pi is 6. Now, because Pi requests for resource at a higher level, being held by P plus 1. Therefore, the highest level resource of Pi plus 1 must be higher than the highest level of Pi. So we have this inequality. Now, because P1, P2, P3, P4, up to Pn are involved in a hierarchical ordering, so P1 is less than P2's highest, and so on. Pn-1 is less than Pn's. So what if we have a circular waiting that is Pn waits for some resource being held by P1? Then we know this Pn has the highest. Pn can only go up. That's the level must be even higher. And if this resource is being held by P1, we have this. As a result, we have L of P1 is less than L of Pn and less than L of P1 in turn. We have this. This is impossible. This means 3 is less than 4 and less than 3. Therefore, circular waiting is impossible, which means hierarchical ordering would prevent circular waiting. Now, with this idea, let's revisit the dining philosopher's problem. We have 5 chopsticks. We consider these 5 chopsticks as system resources. So we order these 5 chopsticks as C0. C means chopsticks 0, less than C1, less than C2, less than C3, and less than C4. Chopsticks 4 is at the highest level. So philosopher I requests chopsticks Ci followed by Ci plus 1. Okay, it only goes up. So when philosopher I gets Ci, the next request must be higher. But the problem is, for philosopher 4, we may have a problem. If we follow philosopher 4 gets his left followed by his right, we violated the hierarchical ordering, because if philosopher 4 gets C4, the highest one, he cannot go back requesting for a lower one. Under hierarchical ordering, philosopher 4 must release C0, must release C4, and get C0 and C4 back, right? But we know, because this hierarchical ordering, why don't we ask philosopher 4 to get C0 first, followed by C4? That is, philosopher 4 must follow getting the lower level resource first by the higher level one. So in this case, instantly, philosopher 4 is a weirdo. He gets the right first, followed by the left one. So isn't it, this is the weirdo version? Therefore, from the hierarchical ordering, we are able to prove that the weirdo version is also deadlock free. Beautiful. So we have so many ways to analyze the philosopher's problem and proving that they are deadlock free. Now, this hierarchical ordering concept came from Dijkstra again. Earlier, when we talk about semaphore, we showed a paper published by Dijkstra called Hierarchical Process Ordering. But this idea was carried further into an operating system called THE. Here, THE is in Dutch. Basically, it is Technical University of Eindhoven, just like Michigan Tech. So sometimes when you see the operating system, THE, usually people would adopt here T.H.E. to prevent a confusion of this is just an English word, THE. So the ordering goes as follows. Dijkstra proposed that the operating system is divided into layers, or we could use level, that's no big deal. So we have hardware as the lowest layer. Each layer on top of a layer abstract away of something built on top of its lower layer. So hardware, then the process allocation layer simply is built on top of hardware, an abstraction of process. On top of it, we build virtual memory. And on top of virtual memory, we have input, output, and a device driver. On top of it, we have communication. And finally, we have file system. These 5 layers are in their supervisor mode. And the users at the highest layer are in the user mode. So the hierarchical ordering goes as follows. Each layer only uses the operations provided by lower layers and does not have to know their implementation. For example, virtual memory layer, the programs implementing virtual memory layer can only use the functionality provided by the process layer. The virtual memory layer cannot use anything provided by the I/O and device communication and file system. So each layer hides the existence of certain data structure, operations, and the hardware from higher level layers. As we know, if you can build an operating system this way, this system does not have deadlock. Don't laugh at this. That was late 1960s. During that period, many operating systems frequently got deadlocks. So this is the first system built by Dijkstra with a very rigorous theoretical and verifiable feature that deadlock will never happen. The system is safe. But the major difficulty in the hierarchical ordering is that it is difficult to arrange resources into a linear ordering like this. Now let's take a look at this. Virtual memory is at layer 1, layer 2. Virtual memory implemented by whatever segmentation or paging must use input output, but the input output and device layer is on top of virtual memory. How will you be able to overcome this problem? Okay, the input output and device layer would carry out input output operations. For each device, you need a buffer. You need a buffer. Then when you allocate a buffer, that is part of memory management. So the I/O device layer must ask a virtual memory layer to provide memory for the input output buffer. Or you may want to say the input output buffer can be provided here, but anyway, they must get it from virtual memory with a common sense. So it's very difficult to order your system resource into hierarchical ordering. So Dijkstra overcome this problem in a very elegant way. You may be able to read the details from Dijkstra paper cited here. So remember, other than non-preemption and mutual exclusion, we are able to develop new mechanisms to break hold and wait and circular waiting. So in your concurrent program with synchronization, then try to think, is it possible you are able to break hold and wait? Or is it possible that you could break circular waiting? This is deadlock prevention. The next lecture, we're going to talk about deadlock avoidance. it's not so strict. We allow the system temporarily involved in a possible deadlock, and then we pull the system back into a safe state. So let me stop here. Hopefully you'll feel this lecture is an easy one. The next lecture, deadlock avoidance, is more algorithmic. The algorithm is also simple. So goodbye. See you next time.